Bird YouTube channel. In this video, you are going to learn how to make the perfect crocheted brim for your hat. This is great for a boy or a girl, for a messy bun hat, or even just a regular cap or a slouchy hat. Literally, the sky is the limit for how you use this brim. As you look down here, you can see here in this pink hat, this was my prototype. This is what I began with. And what I wanted was a hat that literally where the brim would come off of the hat and it wouldn't like rest flat on the head. I don't like that very much. So what I did was I started right down here and I worked slip stitch ribbing, but I worked increases on either side of the center stitch until I got the width I wanted, okay? So if I doubled this over, it was half the width. Then I continued working just even until I got the length I needed. And then I did decreases to get back down to the same number of stitches I had chained, and then that was the end of my brim. When I finished it, I took the brim, which was laying out like this, and I folded it in half, which made it look just like so. And on the inside, I used slip stitches once again to join the two halves together. By doing so, I get this really fabulous, nice and thick brim that is perfect for my needs. You can see here in the rib for him and her hat, I did the same thing. I worked in slip stitch ribbing, working my increases on either side of center, worked even, and then worked decreases either side of center. Folded it over when it was complete. And right here, you can see that those are the slip stitches that join the brim together. Now that you get the general construction of the brim, why don't we go ahead and jump in? Before we do that, if you want to follow along, you can download the free pattern available over at marleybird.com. Along with the free pattern, go ahead and grab some scrap yarn and a crochet hook and you can follow along with me. Where do you get that free pattern? Again, it's at marleybird.com. You'll find a link to it right down there in the video notes. And while you're down there, go ahead and smash that like button, as my kids say, so that way other people know you enjoyed this video. Now let's jump in. For this demonstration, I'm using Red Heart Grande, which is a really nice thick yarn, and I think it will really help you better see what it is I'm doing. I'll begin with a slip knot just like normal, and I'll place that directly onto my hook. Once I have that, I will go ahead and chain 6 chains. 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I'm going to begin with a slip stitch ribbing. To do a slip stitch ribbing, you will work only in the back leg of these stitches. So this back leg right there, we're going to work into those and we're going to do slip stitches. We'll skip the first one, go into the next one, go in with our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the loop on our hook. The best thing here that you need to remember is that this loop here needs to be a little bit loose. Otherwise, when you make this next stitch, they'll be too small. When you come back around, it's hard to work into. Go into the next back loop only, go in, around, out, and then pull that loop through the loop on your hook. In, around, out, pull that loop through the loop on your hook. In, around, out, in, around, out, pull that loop through the loop on your hook. By the end of this row, I should have 5 total stitches completed. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's perfect. That's going to be my first row, okay? I will chain 1 and turn my work. On this row, we will begin to do our increases so that we can get the shape of the brim we want. We will skip the first stitch just like normal. And again, going into the back leg only, this is the back leg right there. Go into the back leg only, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that through the loop on your hook. So that's 1. In the next stitch, we are going to do our increase. So go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through the loop on our hook. We have to do 1 more stitch into that same back loop. So you go into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through the loop on your hook. So we just made 2 slip stitches into 1 stitch, okay? The next stitch right there, we will just do one slip stitch, so go into the back loop only, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through the loop on your hook. At this moment, I want you to take a stitch marker and go ahead and just place it onto that stitch you just created. What this stitch marker signifies is the center stitch of your brim. Through the entire rest of your brim, you will either do increases on this side and this side of that one stitch marker, or you will skip a stitch over there and a stitch over here on either side of this stitch marker, depending if you're doing increases or decreases. So this stitch marker is a good visual cue for you to know exactly where you are. So what we do on this side of our brim, we have to do the same thing on this side, but in reverse. So our next stitch right here, we will put 2 slip stitches into that one stitch. So there's one, go into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through the loop on our hook. Don't forget to go into that last back loop of the end of the row, okay? So I yarned over, pulled up a loop, and then pull through. So at the end of this row, I have increased 2 stitches because I did an extra stitch in this one and an extra stitch in this one. I chain 1 and turn my work. Once you do an increase row, the following row is just a regular slip stitch row, meaning you will do no increases on it. The increases are only made every other row until we get to 21 stitches total. Now that number can change depending on your needs, but for the pattern that you guys might be following, which is the rib for him and her hat, you have to get to 21 stitches total. So let me show you how you would work back along these stitches and move your center stitch up as needed. We've chained 1 and turned, so we will skip this first chain just like normal, go into the next stitch, working in the back loop only, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through the loop on your hook. Then you have to go into each one of these stitches here through the back loop only and create slip stitches. Hopefully at this point you took my advice and you did make those slip stitches a little bit loose and you're not fighting to get your hook into them. You can see here I'm getting ready to go into my marked stitch. So I can remove my marker right now. Go ahead and complete my slip stitch there. And then place my marker once again into the completed stitch. Now you'll notice I am placing my marker into the V of the stitch that's behind the remaining loop on my hook. So if you're having trouble figuring out where it is I'm marking, this is where I'm marking. I'm marking the V of the stitch that I just completed, okay? Then I go ahead, work into the back loop only of the next stitches until I get to the end. Just doing slip stitches. Now that we've completed an even row, we'll go back and work an increase row. Once again, we will place an increase on either side of our marker. Let me show you what I mean. We will finish off this row with a chain 1 and turn. We will skip our chain 1, go into the back loop of the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through. Go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through. Go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through. I can already see that my next stitch is a marked stitch, so that's my clue that, oh, this stitch I just completed, I need to put 2 stitches in there. That's going to be my increase. So I'll go back into the same stitch I just worked into, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through. So now, instead of just having 3 stitches over here, I have 4. I go ahead, go into the next stitch that's marked, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through. I want to move my marker up. Each time, every time I go into that stitch that's marked, I want to move my marker up throughout the entire pattern, okay? So I do that. So now that stitch is completed. And remember, whatever I do over here, I have to do on this side. So on this next stitch here, I need to put 2 slip stitches. So there's 1, and I'll go into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and there's 2. Then I just complete my slip stitches to the end of the row. Chain 1, and turn. So once again, I've just increased this row by 2 stitches, and you can already see that the shape of the brim is starting to take shape. It will begin to look like this. You continue on in this manner, increasing every other row until you get to 21 stitches, as I mentioned before. Once you get to 21 stitches, you will use another marker on the side of your work, so that way you have a point of reference to measure the front of your brim. Since I'm using really big yarn, I don't want to get to 21 stitches on this yarn. So I'm going to work a couple more rows, and then I'm going to show you how to do the next section of the brim. I've worked a couple more rows, and I'm ready to show you what to do next. You can see here I've gone ahead and I finished on a row 3, so it was an evenly slip stitched row, no increases. I have changed colors just so that you can better see the difference of the place from where I was before to this next section, but you don't have to change colors. What I will do is I will go ahead and turn my work, and at this point I will grab another stitch marker, and I'm just going to place my stitch marker right out here in the chain 1 space. I don't move this stitch marker at all throughout the rest of the project. I'm just going to let it hang out there, and I'll show you why here in just a second. For this part, just like you have been working row 3, where you just worked evenly through the back loop only of all of the slip stitches, you will once again do that. So there will be no increases. You will be maintaining the stitch marker here in the center, meaning every time you come to that stitch when it's marked, move that marker up just like before, and then carry on. So for this entire section, you are going to maintain the 21 stitches you already have, working through the back loop only and working even. One thing you will notice is as you're doing this, your work will begin to flatten out and get a little bit more straight. Whereas down here, as we've done our increases, it begins to curve. As this work begins to carry on, it will get straight. I just keep going with my slip stitches through the back loop only. Once again, I want to remind you, because this is very important, when you get to the stitch that's marked, move your marker up each time. Okay? Not the outside marker, not the second marker we added, but the center marker, because that center mark stitch is going to come into play when we begin to do our decreases. I'm going to work a couple more rows, and then I will show you how we will use that outside marker. I've worked several rows evenly so that you can better see what it is your brim is supposed to look like and how that second stitch marker comes into play. As you take a look down here, you can see what I mean about your brim begins to work itself and become very flat as compared to what it looked like at the beginning when we were doing our increases, okay? This right here is what gives us the nice edge of our brim. If you look at the ribbed for him and her hat, you can see here, these are the increases that give us the nice gradual set of the brim. And then the flat portion here, this is the section that we just finished, where we just worked evenly back and forth. So that is this gray portion that you can see on my example. This next set, we want it to look symmetrical to how we began, correct? So instead of doing increases, we will do decreases over here. So to work these decreases, I have gone ahead and I've changed colors so that you can better see what we're doing in the example. But what about this stitch marker? Why did you have me put that stitch marker there, Marley? Here's why. I always have a hard time, especially when I'm working with one color, remembering where I began working an entire section. So when the instructions say that at this particular point, now work 5 inches evenly, I like to have a clue of where to begin counting for those 5 inches. So this stitch marker out here is your indication that that's where the first part, the first row you did to get your 5 inches. And then you'll take your tape measure or your, this is a stitch gauge, and I just measure out from my marker to the end of my work to see if I get 5 inches. Once you've reached the designated measurement, you will then begin to work a row of decreases. Now you'll notice here I began or I'm beginning my next section on the same side as where the tail of my chain is. And I just know that where my chain tail is, that was the same row I was doing my increases, right? So I thought it was nice to be able to begin on that row as well when I'm gonna do my decreases. So here we are, we're gonna jump in. I've gone ahead and I've done my chain 1 and turned. So I will skip my chain 1 and working into the back loop only. Once again, just like before, I will do my slip stitches. Only this time, when I get to my stitch before my marker, something is going to be different this time. So I do my slip stitches, and the next stitch is the stitch before my marker. So what I am going to do is literally nothing. I'm not going to do anything into that stitch. I'm going to skip right over it, go into my marked stitch and do a slip stitch, move my marker, just like I've been doing this whole time, skip the next stitch, go into the following one, do a slip stitch, and carry on down the row just like before. So rather than doing any sort of slip stitch 2 together or anything like that, you simply skip the stitch on either side of that marked stitch. Pretty simple, right? So that was our decrease row. What do you think we do next? We chain 1 and turn, and we work 1 row even, just like before. So I'm still working into the back loop only, and I will do that all the way down this row, working into every single stitch, making sure when I get to my center stitch, I move my marker up, so that way I know where it is. It's just easy to remember that way. Just having your markers there makes it just like, oh, that's where I need to do that stitch or not do that stitch, as the case may be. Chain 1 and turn. I'm on my decrease row again, so I will skip my chain 1, working into my back loops only, all the way down. Let's see here. When I get to my marked stitch, here's my marked stitch right here. Here's the stitch next to it, so I'm going to skip this one, go into the marked stitch, move my marker, skip the next stitch, go into the next one, and carry on down the row. You'll be able to see as you keep going, see how my shape is beginning to curve that way, whereas down here it curved this way. Up here I'm decreasing, so it's curving that way. I will continue on in this method where I do 1 row even and 1 row with decreases until I get back down to 5 stitches. Just like I began with 5, I want to end with 5. So here I am, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I don't want to end on a decrease row. I want to do 1 more row of evenly done slip stitches. So I will chain 1, turn my work, and do my slip stitches all the way down this row. And I don't have to worry about my center marker anymore because I'm not going to need it. Voila! These rows here are the same as the ones I started with. So as I set this down, you can see these are equal to these, with the exception of, remember we did 1 extra row of even stitches in the pink down here. That's why it looks like there's more ridges down here than down here. There's actually the same number of rows, it's just I did 1 full row of pink instead of the gray. That's why you're getting this kind of illusion here. Now, you're not done yet, because now that you have this piece that resembles a football, you're like, wait, Marley, that doesn't look like a brim yet. What do I do? Well, let me show you here. Because we have these curved edges here, when we fold the piece lengthwise, and yours will be less bulky than mine because mine's obviously big fat yarn, you begin to get the nice brim shape that we want. And once we get that, what you will do is you will use your yarn that is still attached, because remember we haven't undone it yet, and you will begin to join these edges together with slip stitches. And what I found is, see how I just did that, and if I extend that out, if we think of these big ridges right here as the peaks, and these kind of areas down here as like the gutters or the valleys, what we're going to do is use our hook to work it through the valleys or the gutters to join with slip stitches. So here I am, I have the 2 pieces together, and I'm going to go directly into, it's almost like it's the chain one or it's the final stitch in this gutter. I'm going to go into the gutter and go into the gutter on the opposite side. See how that works? So here's my ridge, and I'm through the two gutters. Yarn over, pull my hook through those, and then pull that through the loop on my hook. So I've done a slip stitch. So I skip the peak, go over here to the gutter, go in through one side, go out the other side. You see that? Yarn over, pull through, and then pull through. Now, it is still important that you make these a little bit loose. They're not super tight, because when we work the body of the hat, you will actually work into those slip stitches. So here's the peak. I'm going to go over here to the gutter. So I go into the gutter here, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through. Here's the peaks. Go into the gutter next to it, just like so. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that through the loop on my hook. Carry on doing this all the way down the row. So you'll begin to get kind of quick with it, and it's nice because the ridges really, they line up from one side to the other, and you just go into it. Now you might be asking me, Marley, which one do I go into? This first one or the second one? It doesn't really matter, just stay consistent with it. I've been going in through the second one this time, so that's why I'm going through those ones still. So here we are. I'm going to come down here, go into the gutter or the valley. Now I don't need this marker anymore. Remember, that was my marker to measure my length of the center portion of the brim. And I will come down here, carry on all the way down here to the very end. It's pretty easy, right? I'm just slip stitch joining them together. This gives you stability too on your brim. I like this join for this brim. I think it works really well. And I'm all the way down here to the end. Now, down here, this doesn't look like it's joined together, right? These two portions, it's because they're not. What will happen is when you do your brim to your hat, you will use your tail here, and you will thread it through these two portions to join them together and join it to the body of your hat. So that's how that will be joined. Same thing for over here. So this big section here that's kind of flat, it's bigger in the bigger yarn. It's less less so over here in this portion if you're doing smaller yarn. But what you can do is also, when you tie these two together with your tail, take this portion of the hat and just pull it in close to the brim of the hat, and that will give you more of a curve to the brim. You see how that works? Or you can leave it straight out. It's totally up to you. I like to actually take these two portions right here and pull it in towards the hat. I thought it looked better, so I've done that. So for here on out, depending on what you're doing, if you're following the ribbed for him and her hat, you would continue on by working foundation double crochets all the way around and then rejoin, working through the front loop only of those slip stitches, and you would have your brim. If this is something you're working on adding to a different hat, you could go ahead and chain one, finish off your work here. This looks like the brim of many colors. And what you have is a nice brim that can now be attached to basically any hat pattern. But see how nice and lovely that is? Obviously, you probably wouldn't want all these different colors, but this is the way it works out. Remember that I did one extra row of pink right here. That's why it doesn't look like the number of rows are equal, but they definitely are equal here. That's an increase, 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 decrease, 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 and then we have our even, so everything works out. But that's your brim. Pretty cool, huh? It's not so difficult. I think the hardest part is finding where the back loop is of the slip stitches, but once you get in a good rhythm, it takes a little bit of time, but it's completely worth it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and you'll come back here for more videos on crochet and knitting, all taught by me. I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. Looking for more Marley Bird? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Click right down there and you will find more videos just like this teaching you how to knit or crochet, all brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. Go ahead, click away. Don't be shy. Don't forget to smash that like button.